As mentioned, we're here to look at the International GCSE English as a second language. This is the Welcome to Pearson training, and this is Module 2, so we're looking at listening and speaking today. The specification is for first teaching from September 2023, so most of you, I presume, will already be teaching this specification, but if you're not and you're looking to move to this specification at some point during this year, then all of this is also relevant to you. But of course, the first assessment, the first exam, will be in June 2025. So we asked on Monday how many people were currently teaching the Pearson 2017 exam, so I won't ask that question again. I'm assuming we've got most of the same people with us. But just to say, of course, that, in this year before 2025, you will be possibly teaching both specifications as well. So you've got quite a lot to manage in terms of, kind of seeing out the previous specification and embedding this new one. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to explore the content of the new specification. We're going to look in detail again at the assessment objectives, all of the things that we looked at on Monday as well, because we may have new people with us today. We're going to examine the two skills of listening and speaking, so that's absolutely specific to what we do today. And then we're going to think about how each skill's assessed. And again, I'll take you through the support and resources that are available from Pearson. So our agenda looks very much like this. We're going to have a look at the overview of the specification, assessment objectives, weightings, and the topic areas. We'll go fairly quickly through that. And then we're going to look at paper 2, listening, and paper 4, speaking. And once we get there, we'll look at the support and contact that's available. And as I mentioned, we'll try and have a little break for just a few minutes between paper 2 and paper 4, just to enable me to pick up on any questions that are there in the chat, and for you to grab a cup of coffee or whatever it is you'd like to do in the 5-minute break. Okay, so we're going to sort of take you through this overview again. It probably a reiteration of what we said on Monday if you're here on Monday, but if not, just important to remind you. So the Pearson Edexcel International GCSE in English as a second language has 4 components. It's a linear qualification, so that means that all of the exams are taken at the end of the course of study. It's externally assessed. It has a single tier of entry, so all of the students do just one exam paper for each skill, and you don't need to make any decisions about foundation or higher tier, which will make sense to you if you've taught in the UK, because the UK GCSEs quite often have that structure, but international does not. It's available in the October and the June series. So first teaching for September 23, and the first assessment is in June 2025. And of course, the second will then be in October 2025, and so on. So it's available depending where you are in the world, in the June or the October series. Okay, I can notice in the chat that somebody said they couldn't hear, so we'll just get our host from Pearson just to see if he can kind of help you deal with that. But possibly it's a good idea to log out and log back in again, because quite often that's the only way. And then maybe you didn't hear me say that if you didn't hear. So just looking at the qualification overview then, so each paper is out of 50 marks, and it's worth 25% of the International GCSE. So paper 1 is reading, it's an hour. Paper 2 is listening, that's 45 minutes, and that's what we're going to look at a little bit later on today. Paper 3 is writing, and paper 4 is speaking, and the speaking tests last 20 to 23 minutes. Okay, so, and we're also going to look at speaking today. There are 4 assessment objectives. Those are the things that are being tested, the skills that are being tested. And of course, each assessment objective is in a separate paper. But assessment objective 1 is reading, that's understanding and providing a response in written English to a variety of types of written English language. Listening is understanding and providing a response in English to a variety of types of spoken English language. Writing is about communicating and responding, and use of written English language when using a range of vocabulary. And speaking is about communication, interaction, and the use of spoken language. So no real surprises there, but those assessment objectives are, if you like, a definition of what each part of the assessment is testing. And as we can see on this slide here, each paper has an assessment objective, so each paper is worth 25% and each assessment objective is worth 25%. This is important in a way because, of course, sometimes it will be skills like speaking and writing that we need to put an awful lot of work into as teachers, and sometimes reading skills can be a little bit neglected because we kind of take that as a given. But in fact, it is important that you develop reading skills, for example, in English, or it is important that you develop listening skills because they have an equal amount of weighting with speaking and writing, although speaking and writing are always the skills that are more difficult, I think, to develop in students, the productive skills. Now, in terms of the topic content and what you need to be teaching and dealing with, there are 5 topic areas. So we're going to say a little bit about the topic areas, but topic area 1 is myself and others. So that covers hobbies and leisure time, homes, family, friends, and relationships. Topic 2 is travel and tourism, and that covers transport and accommodation, tourist activities, travel destinations, and reason for traveling. And topic 3 is education. This covers school life, future education plans, and information and communication technology. Topic 4 is employment, and this covers part-time and voluntary work, future employment plans, and job applications. Now, topic 5 is global issues, and topic 5 is a little bit different because topic 5 is in writing and in speaking is an optional topic. So the students will need to study one from environment, equality, or the media. Okay, in topics 1 to 4, they need to study all 3 of those sub-themes. For example, in topic 4, part-time and voluntary work, future employment plans, and job applications, they must study all of those. But in topic 5, we only need students to choose one of those topics of study. Now, I'll say a little bit of something about the grammar and vocabulary lists now. So there are 2 appendices in the specification. So Appendix 2 in the specification is the grammar list, and this grammar list contains examples of grammatical knowledge expected at CEFR levels A1 to B2. So we're not extending beyond B2. So the expectation is that for the level of the qualification, we don't go beyond B2. And the Global Scale of English Teacher Toolkit, which you can access through that link, will also give you examples of the grammar coverage at that level. And Appendix 3 in the specification, this is the vocabulary list that contains examples of vocabulary knowledge expected again at levels A1 to B2. And it's arranged in vocabulary type, nouns, verbs, and also in topics. So you can sort by parts of speech, but you could also sort and find words by topic. There are other examples as well, further examples of vocabulary, again in the Global Scale of English Teacher Toolkit. and you can have a look at that there. The vocabulary list is a useful guide to vocabulary, but there is not an absolute guarantee that every word in the reading and listening paper, for example, will be on that list. There are assumptions that we make. So we're talking about the level of vocabulary, the typical level of vocabulary, but the list is not an absolute guaranteed list. Nevertheless, it's a really good list for teachers to work with and for students to aim to know. But knowledge beyond that as well may also be something that we would want students to have and to develop. After all, English is a living language, and they are learning English. They're not specifically learning this list of vocabulary. Okay, so we've sort of said the general things. We've kind of given that sort of general overview. I'm going to begin now to talk to you a little bit about the listening paper. So for the listening paper, students are required to listen and understand a variety of spoken English language extracts. They need to identify key factual information, opinions and viewpoints, advantages and disadvantages. They need to understand a wide range of grammatical structures as detailed in the grammar list. And they need to understand a wide range of relevant vocabulary as detailed in the core vocabulary list. So with reference to the grammar and vocabulary list, the reading extracts are developed and produced for assessment. The first assessment, as we mentioned, is going to be in June 2025, and there are 50 marks available for that assessment. And no dictionaries, of course, are allowed in the exam. That's important. Now, there are 9 recorded extracts, and the recorded extracts for listening relate only to topics 1 to 4. So remember that global topic, that theme 5, topic 5, is not assessed in listening. The topics, the recorded extracts increase in length and challenge through the paper. So they start off short and easy, and they become longer and more complex by the time we get to number 9. They include informational broadcasts, formal and informal conversations, and public presentations. They may include one or more than one speaker, and sometimes they're divided into 2 or more clips, so that we hear a little section and the candidates answer some questions, and then we hear the next section and the candidates answer the next question, and so on and so forth. The recordings, of course, are also produced by actors in a studio. So you can be confident that the way in which English is spoken in these recordings should be clear, and it should be standard English that would be understandable right across the English-speaking world. Okay, so just to remind you of that. So you shouldn't find anything that candidates would find difficult to understand in terms of the way the language is produced orally or orally or pronounced or so on. Paper 2 lasts 45 minutes, and there are a variety of question types, and we'll look at those in a moment or two. Candidates have got 5 minutes, however, to read through the paper before the first extract starts, and they can make notes during those 5 minutes. And candidates hear each extract twice, so everything that's recorded is played twice, and they can write at any time during the test. I think it's worth mentioning to teachers as well that candidates will benefit from some training and practice in how to use that 5 minutes of reading time. For example, you might want to train them to highlight certain things, to circle interrogative words and so on, so that we absolutely focus the candidates on the questions. And keep in mind that one of the really nice features of the Pearson exam papers is that the format of the exam, just as we said with reading, will be the same every year. So question 1 will be a certain type of question. Question 2, extract 2, that will have a certain pattern, the same. And we'll look at that a little bit further on as we go through. But of course, for each of those things, you might want to be teaching your students the strategy to answer the question, but also what is the strategy for using, for maybe annotating, for maybe finding certain elements of the question, checking maybe things like the tense or the time frame of a question. So what should they do in that 5 minutes? So training them to use that 5 minutes effectively is a useful thing, and to use it actively, not to just sit there and read, but to actually apply some strategies. So we're going to have a look at recording 1, 2, and 3. We're going to just talk a bit about those. So recording 1, so the stimulus could be a short recording. It might be things like a radio advert, announcement, short conversation, and it's the question type are multiple choice questions. So those are those 4 option multiple choice questions. Recording 2 will be, again, a short recording, radio advert, announcement, short conversation, voicemail, so slightly wider range of possible recording types here. And again, the question type is multiple response questions. So multiple choice where you choose 1 answer out of 4, but a multiple response question where students will tick a certain number of boxes out of a range of boxes. So again, we're sort of picking up a little bit more demand in recording 2. And recording 3 could be a short recording, radio adverts, announcements, conversations, voicemails, etc. And here we're going back to multiple choice questions. So for recordings 1, 2, and 3, they're all what we would call objective questions. So they're questions where the answer is there for the candidates and they need to tick the box or put a cross in the correct box. Things I think for teachers to think about with multiple choice questions and activities around those is to understand, as we shall see in a moment, as we saw with reading, that sometimes there are those elements of distraction. So just because you happen to have heard a particular word in isolation in the recording doesn't mean that that's automatically the correct answer. And sometimes it's worth doing some work with students around these multiple choice and multiple response questions to ask them the question, why are the wrong answers wrong? Okay, so it's a multiple choice question and with answer B is the correct answer, but why are A, C, and D wrong? So that, again, students develop that sort of strategy of listening to the whole of the recorded extract, processing the whole of the recorded extract, and processing the whole of the question. So let's have a little look through, and we're going to have a look at recording 1, question 1. So we see here the transcript, and this is what students are going to hear. Again, it can be useful to work with transcripts because sometimes one of the things that students struggle with, as we all know when you learn a language, is finding the spaces between the words. It all seems to become one. And so it really can be quite useful to work with the transcripts. And they're also a kind of guide to help students with speaking and writing as well. So at a hotel, good evening, welcome to the Garden Hotel. My name is Oscar. Your room number is 32. I will take you to your room. It is on the 1st floor. You have a beautiful view from the room. You can see the lake. We have a great restaurant here. It opens at 7 o'clock in the morning and closes at 10 o'clock at night. You can also have room service from 7 a.m. until 11 o'clock at night. you can read information about the hotel on this piece of paper. Have a wonderful holiday. Okay. So here we see the question types for question 1. There are 6 marks for this. Now, we mentioned, didn't we, this sort of idea of elements of distraction. So the hotel is called the Garden Hotel, the Lake Hotel, and the Palace Hotel. Well, actually, we saw those things mentioned. If we look back at the transcript, okay, welcome to the Garden Hotel, okay, but we also notice that there is a view of the lake, so the word lake appears there as well. So we've got that little element of distraction. So if you're listening carefully, and you get that nice easy question, the Garden Hotel, but the lake, they do hear the word lake. So just make sure that students are really kind of clued up to listening out for the detail. Just hearing the word lake would give you the wrong answer. The things as well that students might be wanting to do in their multiple choice in their 5 minutes preparation time is, thinking, do I know the number 13, 22, 32? Okay, and as you look at those as well, 13 and 32. So we've got 13 and 32. So you just, again, get them to say those numbers to themselves in their head, because you can see the bit, 13 and 32, you can see how students could confuse those. And we've got 22 and 32. So when you're doing listening, teaching them listening, things like numbers, we need to listen carefully to the whole number. Very easy to trip over those kinds of things. Okay. So we're going to have a look at question 2, question 2A now. So question 2A is an advert for Hillview School. And so 2 speakers, I'll read them both, of course. Are you looking for a great place to study? Then come to Hillview School. We offer a great education. You can choose from more than 20 subjects, including music and computer science. What's more, the teachers are excellent. They work very hard to make sure you do well in your exams. You see that we're beginning to get some slightly more complex vocabulary, but still quite straightforward at this point. And question 2A will be a multiple completion type activity, so it will look like that. Okay, so what does the advert talk about? Listen to the recording and put a cross in each one of the 3 correct boxes. So there are 3 things that the advert talks about, and you need to put a box, a tick in each of those 3 correct boxes. Okay. And again, just the sort of thing that you might train your students to do in their 5 minutes reading time is to circle the 3 so that they put only 3 and no more than 3. Question 2B then continues. Okay, and we see the transcript there. I won't read the whole transcript out to you. You can read and assimilate. But again, it will do that same thing. It has those 3 correct boxes. 3 out of 6 that they have to choose the 3 correct boxes according to what they've heard. So question 2, as you see, is that multiple completion task. Question 1 was multiple choice. Question 2 is multiple completion. If we look at question 3 then, okay, we mentioned at the beginning that the recordings get longer, and that the recordings also get more complex. So we start to see as well here that we're, and here we've got a conversation rather than a single speaker. And we've got more interplay, more exchange in the conversation than we saw in question 2. So all of that adding a little to the complexity of the passage. And we go back here to those multiple choice questions. Okay, so again, the 3 option multiple choice questions that the students need to answer, A, B, or C. And again, it's quite useful for teachers to do some work. If we look at that question B, around qualifying language, not paid well, paid quite well, paid very well. So at this point in the paper, and to deal with multiple choice questions, sometimes you will need to train students to deal with those quite and very and fairly and not always. So all of those bits of English that sort of qualify an idea quite often are things that will appear in the questions in a multiple choice form. And again, we would expect that there is distraction. So in question A there, we're probably going to hear something about the phone, something about television, and something about the radio. And in C, we're going to hear about sisters, parents, and possibly grandparents. So students need to not just choose the correct answer, they need to, if you like, eliminate from their kind of possibilities. They need to eliminate the incorrect one. So this is why I say, you know, a good activity can be to choose the correct answer and also to ask students to say why the incorrect one is wrong. And we're wanting to train that ability to think and deal with those questions in that way. Now, that was recordings 1, 2, and 3. Let's have a look at recordings 4, 5, and 6. So recording 4 is a stimulus with a short recording, radio adverts, announcements, conversations, voicemails, etc. The question types here are multiple response questions and short open response questions. You know, as the recordings get longer, they're split into sections. So here we're going to see multiple response. That's those 3 option multiple response, tick 3 box questions, sorry, that we saw in question 2, and short open response questions. In common with what we said about listening, about reading, sorry, the responses can be very brief, and we certainly don't need full sentences. Stimulus, recording 5, the stimulus could be things like radio interview, podcast, conversations, presentations. And as you see now, we're starting to have stimulus material that might be longer, more complex, that might deal with ideas more widely. The question types can be multiple choice or short open response questions. So again, in sections, we'll have a look in a moment. Recording 6 then could be radio interviews, podcast, conversations, debates. Okay, and you notice now debate, so we're getting perhaps into a range of ideas here that we didn't have at the beginning. We had purely factual information. Once you get into things like interviews and conversations, debates, you might also be dealing with ideas. It's not just your bedroom is room 32. It's what do you think of certain things. So there, some complexity begins to come in. And the question type here is a gap fill question, and we'll have a look in a moment. So let's have a look. Recording 4. Okay, so this is in 2 parts. Okay, so we've got part A here, 4A. Okay, so we see the recording there. We see the sort of text that we have, but still looking there, the vocabulary is quite accessible, and so not at a particularly high level yet in recording 4, but as we progress through, we'll see how sort of vocabulary demand increases as well. And it's one of those 3 option multiple choice question, 3 option, tick 3 boxes, multiple completion type questions that we saw earlier on. So you see the pattern, don't you, as well, that that there are certain question types, and for each of those question types, students need to develop a strategy. So what are they going to do in their 5 minutes reading time with a question of that type? And also, you know, what is the strategy? What is the strategy that they are going to apply to choose the correct answers and also to eliminate the incorrect ones? 4B is a little bit longer, but it's a continuation there. And you also sort of see that there are some instructions here, but there are some sort of slightly more complex ideas to process, you know, the cupboard under the kitchen sink, for example. So we're not just talking about a cupboard, but we're talking about the location, the exact location of this cupboard, for example. Okay, so then we have some short free response, open response type questions. 3 marks available there for that. So, you know, what does Alma need to shut? What's in the bag that Alma needs to take home? And where in the kitchen is the cupboard that Alma needs? And so that was the under the sink answer. Okay. And of course, for each of those, we need a concise answer. It's important for students to understand that they must write no more than 5 words, but actually quite often fewer than under the sink is what you need, for example, for C to answer that question. We don't even need it is under the sink. So just a phrase that answers the question will give the mark. Okay, under the sink, beneath the sink. Okay, and then that's absolutely fine for an answer there. And you see the sort of mark scheme, and that acceptable answers bit is kind of interesting, really. What does she need to open the window? What's in the bag? Food. Where is the cupboard? Under the sink. And that gives you a sort of example of what examiners are looking to give marks for there. Examiners will also, and I mentioned when we talked about the reading paper, those acceptable answers are not the only acceptable answers. You see, if in B they had written, the candidate wrote things to eat, that is food, and that would be okay. Okay, so keep in mind that what we're testing is comprehension. So sometimes candidates find an unexpected way to answer a question that's justifiable and is correct. And in fairness to the candidates, marks will be given for those. Okay, so just, you know, kind of be sort of aware of that. I can't think that there are particularly synonyms for window, but under, beneath would be it's an unusual word, but it would be correct as well. So that again would be a sort of acceptable alternative, and so not every acceptable answer will always appear on the mark scheme. So when you're assessing students, when you're marking the exams themselves, if they produce an answer that you think, yes, that's correct, but it's not what it says on the mark scheme, you can still give that mark, and examiners also will still give that mark. Question 5A then, so recording 5A rather, question 6, and this is one dealing with the world of work. As you see, we're developing into some slightly more unusual vocabulary, but still quite sort of accessible in terms of what we're seeing in front of us there. But of course, a longer passage. So always with listening, of course, there is the question of memory. with reading, you have the passage in front of you and you can look at the passage and you can look at the questions and you can answer the questions. For listening, you hear it twice, so we've not only got to think about the questions, we've also got to remember what we've heard long enough to answer them. Whereas a bit of memory training can be useful, really, a useful thing to develop with listening. And then we've got those multiple choice questions. And again, this is where, because we know now that we're going to hear a longer passage, there's more demand on the memory here. This might be one of those questions where you say, well, actually, from question 6, I want you to really work on those during your 5 minutes reading time, just to make sure that you're absolutely clear, so that you can answer the questions as you go along, rather than leave them rather than kind of struggle at the time. Candidates have quite a lot to do in questions like this, because of course they've got to listen to English and they've got to read English, and then they've got to make a decision as well. And as you can see, some of the questions are a little bit longer there, but the same things apply about distraction, those elements of distraction, things that they hear in the recording but are not actually part of the correct answer, and also about choosing the correct answer and also eliminating the incorrect ones. So 5B continues, on we go, and 5B, that gives us question 7, and question 7 is the free response question, and again, no more than 5 words. So we see the pattern of the question types, and so for each of these there is the sort of strategy that we want. So, but again, when we get to this point in the paper, we are looking for some precision in candidates' answers. How long has Mila worked at the bakery? So we're looking for a time, and again, students should think in their reading time. We're wanting that idea of time, and we might hear more than one time. And the time might not be a specific thing. It could be since, I've worked here since last year, and a year would be perhaps the answer. So what's the only problem with Mila's job? Okay, so we're expecting that they're only going to hear one problem. And how does Mila know that the bakery is successful? Here, students are required to sometimes draw conclusions to sort of make an inference. Okay. At the end of this passage, it says the bakery is doing really well. We always have customers coming into the shop. So the passage she doesn't say the bakery is successful because we make a lot of money. So here the candidates need to infer, they need to say, actually, it's a successful bakery because lots of customers. And so lots of customers would be the answer there. And that's a simple inference. Okay. So we see acceptable answers, okay, and short, concise answers, okay. There are always customers, there are always lots of customers in the shop, okay. And so that's the kind of level of response that we need. And it's useful to show your students the mark schemes that and to really train them to answer in as few words as they possibly can. But more than 5 words and marks are withheld. So recording 6 then, and this is going to be question 8. So we've got the conversation that you see there. And it continues, you see, so we're picking up the level of demand and hence the memory load as well. The processing load picks up, but we're still in the domain of relatively accessible vocabulary. And this is a multiple completion question. Okay, so for 5 marks, the candidates have to decide which of the words from the box fits into the space that is there. And so candidates are looking to use sometimes their knowledge of grammar as well as their knowledge of language. So you will see Fatima has something, been to the travel agency before, and so never is a possibility. Diving doesn't make any sense. Hiking doesn't make any sense. Sightseeing, surfing doesn't make it. Often is a possibility. Peaceful doesn't make any sense. Rarely is a possibility. Busy, noisy, and quiet don't make any sense. So in their reading time, candidates ought to be looking at that and thinking, is it often, never, or rarely? And so on and so forth. So these are the strategies that we want to train our students to look at, which are the possible words. And you might find that what you would like to get your candidates to do is to write the letter A above never, often, and rarely in there as a thing, because actually when they come to listen, they think, actually, what I've really got is a choice of 3. I don't have the choice of 10 or 11 there. It's really just down to a choice of 3. Okay, so get them to think about the sense and to think perhaps about the grammatical forms as well. What could possibly fit? Now, the last 3 recordings then, recordings 7, 8, and 9. The stimulus is for 7 is a longer recording, for example, radio interviews, podcasts, conversations, presentations. And the question type is multiple choice questions. For question 8, the stimulus is a long recording, for example, radio interview, podcast, conversation, presentation. And the question type is all short open response questions. So here we see that there is more demand, because with the multiple choice questions, of course, the answer is there and they just need to choose it. But with the open response, the answer is something they need to find. And the same pattern for recording 9, the same kinds of activities, and all short open response questions. And you will see now, as we have a look at those questions and the transcripts for those questions, that the demand, the level increases from what we've seen in those middle grade, middle level questions that we looked at just a moment ago. So recording 7, this is for question 9. So here we go through and we see that we've got a little bit more complex text, and we've got some slightly more unusual vocabulary. Words like beforehand, thoroughly might be a more difficult word to understand. Bother, okay, could also be something that is a little bit more challenging for students to understand. And it continues and it goes on. So you see again that we've got, and again we've got in there, we've got some slightly less familiar vocabulary, you know, with sort of things like skyscrapers, for example. Portraits, again, can be something that are slightly more unusual vocabulary items. And with that one, those multiple choice questions of the kind that we've seen before, and I don't need to say any more about those, I don't think. So recording 8 and questions 10A and 10B then. So we, again, starting to sort of see that we've got that more complexity coming in. And we're also now we're talking about business, and we're talking about kind of jobs in the world of work. So that we're talking about things that are of greater complexity for students. And what we're also seeing now is particularly this speaker two. The speaker two is saying more. So again, there's a much bigger sort of memory load. And as we saw previously, some kind of slightly more unusual items of vocabulary. You know, in that speaker to you move up from a junior role to a senior or managerial position. So some slightly more complicated things to understand. And question 10 is an open response question, but it kind of looks like this. So there is a little bit of support here for students, because really what they're having to do is to complete the sentences. Okay, so advantages of working for a big company are we only need one detail for each of those. And so it says, if you look at the rubric, the information at the top, listen to the podcast and fill in the following table. Write one advantage or disadvantage in each space. And so this is a note-taking activity, really. We expect in the recording that there will be more than one advantage and more than one disadvantage, but only one mark is given. So students just need to choose one and write those things in there. Okay. Let's have a look at transcript 9 then. Here, and you start to see, of course, the length and the complexity. And we're also starting to see more difficult vocabulary. We're starting to see some much longer sentences, and also some different kinds of clause types as well. So over-tourism is a word to describe when there are too many tourists in a particular place. First used in 2012, it describes a problem that has been growing since the 1980s due to factors such as the availability of air travel, enormous cruise ships, and the rising world population. So all sorts of things going on in these passages that require students to pay real attention. Over-tourism might not mean anything to a student as a word on its own, but that word is explained within the text. Over-tourism is a word to describe. Okay, so there's a sort of internal gloss of that word in the text. So that's complexity. And this phrasing first used, you know, it doesn't say it was first used, just first used. So that using that participle phrase there, again, it is something that kind of gives authenticity, but it also gives that text a sort of feeling of academic demand, if you see what I mean. And we see all sorts of things as we kind of scan through blockbuster film and soared, you know, the popularity soared. So the verb to soar means to grow, to increase rapidly. But that's quite a difficult word. So for this as well, we might be wanting students to, as we're training them, to try to deduce the meaning of words that they haven't come across. If you didn't know that verb to soar, The Beach, released in 2000, and it's, you know, blockbuster film, The Beach, released in 2000, and its popularity soared. Okay, so you can understand from that soared must mean either went up or went down, and because of the context of what's going on around it and the context of the passage overall, you could work out that soared meant, you know, went up into the sky, grew rapidly. Okay, but we also see, look at the length of that. So it's a long recording, and they will hear it twice, but of course there are questions to answer as well. Things just to say about this as well, we're allowing longer answers. So for each question, write no more than 10 words. So we could allow some longer answers here because the questions perhaps require more words to answer. But also just train your students as well to look out for the numbers in the questions. Question A, write down one of the reasons given for the problem of over-tourism. So it's one reason and one mark. And we would expect that there were several things that they could choose from, but we just want one of them. So they mustn't give more answers than are needed. Just give one answer. And again, that circling that one or underlining that word one in their reading time is a useful activity for them to do. And we see it happen in A, we see it happen in D, and we see it happen in E. So, just make sure that they are reading the question carefully. Write down one way that cities plan to solve over-tourism. And we see examples there of marks that were given acceptable answers. Okay. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to give you just a brief pause now. We're going to just stop. It's 9:52, so perhaps we'll just have about 3 minutes or so. I'll have a look on the chat if there are any questions that need to be answered, or if you have any questions about what we've said so far that you'd like to get me to have a go at answering, you can drop them into the chat now. And we'll be back just in perhaps according to my clock it's 9:52, so let's come back in 3 minutes. Let's just give yourself 3 minutes. If you need to get a quick cup of coffee, you maybe just have time to do that. So we'll be back at 9:55 UK time. Hi there. Well, we'll just make a start again. Thank you. One or two questions that have kind of appeared in the chat. So how much time do they have between each recording section? If you listen carefully to the sample assessment material, you'll have an idea. And there isn't a fixed amount of time. There's usually plenty of time. In fact, sometimes there's almost too much time, but we're careful to think about what it is the students need to do. So there will be a bit more time where they have to do a free response type answer, because that takes more time to do than where they tick a box. But there will be plenty of time. And if you, as I say, if you listen to the sample assessment recording, you'll have an idea that will kind of give you a guide. So are there some podcasts where they can listen for practice? Well, there's lots and lots of stuff, and I think just we will have things on the Pearson website, but again, maybe have a look for some of those things which are on the BBC website, for example. You may find things there. BBC Sounds can be very good. And also on YouTube. So just get them doing some listening to authentic voices. And can they use highlighter pens in all parts of the exam? Yes, they absolutely can. Yes, and that's we would sort of encourage them to do that. So yes, whatever strategies you think would be useful for that, that would be absolutely fine. I have a question about the CEFR levels, and could I clarify more about them? Well, we won't have time as such today, but Ramona, the information that's in the link that will come with should come with the PowerPoint afterwards will give you some guidance about, and what they are really is sort of levels of language which go from A1 up to C3, I think. So from absolute sort of beginner learner up to the level of effectively a native speaker. And so they're a guide to how far you need to go with English for this qualification, because keep in mind, this is an international GCSE level qualification. It's a first exam quite often in English for our students. And so we only need to go so far, and we mustn't really, we need to go so far, and we need to make sure that we've got a good mastery of the language at that level, but we don't need to teach necessarily beyond it. But my sort of best advice really is that you have a look at, you kind of have a look at those links that will be in the PowerPoint, and that will explain it. And then you can also you can find lots of information about that online, but they sort of describe levels of language, if you see what I mean. So that's what they're for, and they will describe the level at B2, which is the maximum level that we would be expecting at the end from the best students in this exam, in this qualification. Okay, good. So we're going to have a think now in the next 45 minutes or so about speaking, and we will then, at the end of the session, we can pick up on any questions that remain. But thank you for those questions that came through, because they're quite often clarify things that other people were wondering about but didn't ask. So it's good to ask the questions. Now, let's have a think about the speaking then, and the speaking tests. So the speaking tests are conducted on a date chosen by the centre within the period specified by Pearson Edexcel. So on the website, you will be able to find what we call the exam window for the speaking tests. And so you need to just make sure that you're clear about when you can conduct the tests. But the test is conducted by you, the teacher. So the October series is really any time from mid-October up to and including the date of the last written ESL exam in January. And the June series is usually from mid-April up to and including the last written ESL exam in June. But the exact dates, you can check those on the website. And we mentioned as well that there's a single tier of entry. Okay, so all candidates, all students do exactly the same exam, and differentiation is by outcome. The speaking test in total lasts 22 to 23 minutes, but we'll look at the breakdown of that time in a moment. So there's 10 minutes of supervised preparation time for tasks 1 and 3, and candidates can make notes during that time. They're not allowed to use any dictionaries in the exams, and the tasks relate to the compulsory topics 1 to 4 and the student's chosen subtopic, topic 5. Okay, so you remember that global topic for speaking and write was assessed in speaking and writing, but they had to choose one of the three to study in a little bit more depth. And we talked about how that worked in writing when we talked about that on Monday. Each student is assessed individually. The oral exams are recorded and they're uploaded to the Pearson portal for external assessment. That means that you, as the teacher, you conduct the test, you ask the students the questions, but you don't need to do any marking. The marking is done by Pearson staff externally, but what your job is to do is to record it and to upload it. Or your exams officer in your school can do that. And there's guidance on the work on the website as to how to upload it. So I had a question now. Do we need training to conduct the test as a teacher? Well, we're going to sort of talk you through what you need to do now. And I think there may be some specific training available at a later date, but that probably won't come along until a little bit before the first assessment, because we're in June 2025. But if there is a sort of feeling that you'd like some more specific training, we can look at that, and I will send that message back and see if we might be able to sort that out, because yes, I agree that sometimes it's useful to have things. Sometimes as well, we're able to produce a little video or that sort of thing to help train teachers and to reassure students as well. So we can kind of look at that. Thank you for the suggestion. So what are students required to do? Well, they have to convey information and participate in extended discussions on a range of topics using context-specific vocabulary. They need to express opinions and develop their ideas. They need to respond spontaneously to both predictable and unpredictable questions on a range of topics. They need to speak fluently and coherently. They need to use a range of structures and vocabulary. They need to deliver a speech, and they also need to ask questions. So just we'll sort of go through how the test works, and this is, if you like, part of the training, but we can look at whether we could produce and provide something further. There's a warm-up conversation, so this lasts about a minute. It doesn't give the students any marks, so it's not assessed, but it's just their opportunity to begin to relax a little bit and to be ready for the test. So you, as the teacher, if you're the teacher examiner, you have to introduce yourself, and there's a sort of series of questions that you can ask them on a familiar topic, and it's just to give them that opportunity to begin to speak English and to sort of settle into the task. So what is the warm-up activity? And this is how it works. So you read out to the student the following. Before we begin the test, we're going to do a warm-up activity with some non-test questions that will not be marked. And then you use the prompts below. You don't ask any additional questions. So you ask them, how is your day going? What do you think of the weather today? What did you do before the test today? What are you going to do after the test today? Okay, and so they answer those questions. And within those questions, they have a little bit of opportunity, you see, to give their opinions and their views. You know, how is their day going? What do you think of the weather? So they're beginning to think about opinions and why they want to say those things. And they also have a little bit of an opportunity to deal with past and future time frames. So it just reminds them of some of the things that they need to do later on in the assessed part of the exam. And then you just bring that warm up to a close and say, thank you. Now we will begin the test. So task 1 is a role play, and it lasts 1 to 2 minutes. There are 10 marks, and it's based on one of topic areas 1 to 4, and it's chosen randomly using a randomization grid. And there will be a booklet for teacher examiners that will tell you which role play you need to use for each candidate. So that will be explained in that booklet. Candidates, of course, have preparation time, so they can make notes during the timed preparation time. They need to make their notes on a piece of paper or not on the actual speaking card itself. There are 5 prompts on the card. Now, one-word answers are not sufficient to gain full marks. Okay, so we also see on the card an exclamation mark, and that indicates an unseen question, and students need to respond to something they've not prepared. And there's a question mark that indicates that students must ask a question. Okay, so in terms of the candidate card, what the candidates will see, they are given instructions. It says you are talking to your friend. You want to go to the cinema together to see a film. The teacher will play the role of your friend and will speak first. You will talk to your teacher using the 5 prompts below. The teacher will speak in English and you must answer in English. You are expected to say a few words or a short phrase in response to each prompt. One-word answers will not be sufficient to gain full marks. We'll look at that in a moment. Where you see exclamation mark, you must respond to something you have not prepared. Where you see a question mark, you must ask a question. So this is the sort of thing that the candidates will see. So you are talking to your friend. You want to go to the cinema together to see a film. So the candidate needs to think about in their preparation time, cinema, how often? Okay. So maybe they're going to say, I go to the cinema every week. And then we want to say something about film and type. I like comedies. And then they're going to need to answer a question that they haven't seen. And then they need to say something about food and what. Okay. I want to go to McDonald's. I want to eat a sandwich. Anything to do with food and what kind of food. And then they need to ask a question about the cinema and the price. So how much are the tickets? Okay. Is the cinema expensive? How much does it cost to go into the cinema? So if we have a look now at the teacher, so this is you as the teacher, And you see you're given the exact things that you need to say. You don't change any of those things. You just read them from the card exactly as they are laid out in front of you. So begin the role play by reading the following introduction. So you as the teacher say, we're now going to complete task 1 of the test, which is the role play. You're talking to your friend. You want to go to the cinema together to see a film. I am your friend. I will speak first. So I say, how often do you go to the cinema? The candidate answers the question. What type of film do you want to see? And the candidate answers the question. When do you want to go to the cinema? And this is the unseen one, so they have to say on Tuesday. Remember, the candidates, to gain full marks, need to say more than one word. So when do you want to go to the cinema? If they say today, they only get 1 mark. But if they say on Tuesday, they would get 2 marks. But we don't need a full sentence. We should have something to eat before the film. What do you want to eat? And then they have to say what they want to eat. And then you can ask the candidate, do you have a question for me? Okay, maybe they will ask that spontaneously, but otherwise, do you have a question for me? And they have to ask a question about the price of cinema tickets. Okay, so that's how the role play works. Notice that the marks for each one of those 5 bullet points, 5 interactions, is 2, 1, or 0. So it's 2 if they did it, if they clearly communicated, and we don't need a sentence, we don't need a full sentence, but clear communication and more than 1 word. It's 1 if they partially communicated, or it was a little bit ambiguous, or they just did what I said today or tomorrow, they just did 1 word. They can only have 1 mark. And of course, 0 if they didn't answer the question, or they misunderstood the question and answered a different question, or there isn't communication. But that role play task is marked for communication only and not for quality of language. So provided what they say could be a good answer to the question and reasonably understandable by an English person, they could have 2 marks. So task 2 then, let's have a look at task 2. So task 2 is the presentation and discussion questions. So this is a 5-minute task, and candidates could get 20 marks for this one. So there's a pre-prepared speech on a topic of the student's choice from one of the 3 subtopics. So this must be from topic 5, global issues. So they need to produce a speech for that, and they have up to 2 minutes to deliver their speech. And they can have this prepared in advance. That's absolutely fine. They're not allowed to have notes for it, but they can have it prepared in advance. And then the teacher asks some follow-up questions, and the task ends at an appropriate point for the student or at the end of 3 minutes. So it's a 5-minute task, 2 minutes of presentation, and then 3 minutes of questions about the topic. And you as a teacher will decide on what those questions are. You need to listen carefully to the speech, and you need to ask them questions about the topic and also about the things that they have said. And you might be well advised as well to try to ask that mixture between open and closed questions. So questions that are closed questions are things like what and when and who. Okay, questions. When did this problem begin? You know, who was that person? Because those are short answer, but also we're wanting to have, and they enable you to find detail but also more open questions. Tell me a bit more about, or explain why, or what do you think of? Okay, and we're also going to suggest to you that you kind of chase the mark scheme. So have a look at what how those things are marked, and make sure you target your questions around those. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But anyway, look, task 2, this is the instructions for the teacher examiner. You should start the task with the introduction provided. You must return the candidate's A4 sheet of notes at the beginning of this task, the stimulate after completing the exam. The topic talk element is intended to last no more than 2 minutes. Follow-on questions, as we said, 3 minutes. You should use the list of set questions to choose the follow-on questions to ask the candidate. And you may use up to 2 of your own questions, as I mentioned, to supplement those from the list. And questions may be repeated, but no more than twice. And candidates must be allowed to develop their responses as well as they are able. So the topic talk, then the instructions to the teacher examiner, begin the topic talk task with the following introduction. We're now going to complete task 2. This task is the topic talk on the topic you have chosen. You will have 2 minutes to speak. When you have finished, I will ask you some questions about your topic talk, and they will have their pre-prepared notes that they are now able to have, and you hand them their notes, and you say you may start now. And you allow the candidate to speak for 2 minutes. If the candidate's topic talk does not come to an end before 2 minutes, you need to stop them with the following: thank you, you have been speaking for 2 minutes. I will now ask you some follow-up questions. Okay, and then you're told, now ask the candidate some questions from the list below, adapt according to what the candidate has spoken about. The questions listed below become progressively more challenging. It's important to ensure that candidates are given sufficient opportunity to demonstrate their command of language. You may ask no more than 2 of your own questions. And so those are the list of questions. You don't have to ask your own questions, but you can. So tell me more about. Okay, so you've listened to what they've said. You've noticed that they've talked and they've chosen equality, and they've talked about maybe the rights of women. And you say, so tell me more about the rights of women. Where did you find the information about whatever it is? What do you think about the problem of? Okay. What could be done about? What's the most important thing that people should understand about your topic? That's a nice question. And as we go on, we go through, what question would you ask an expert on this topic? You talked about something. What changes do you think there will need to be in the future? Now, let's just have a look. Yes, so we had a question about, can candidates prepare their speech for task 2 before the exam? Yes, they must prepare. Yes, they have to prepare their speech in advance. Yes, so that's absolutely essential that they are prepared. And that's a nice, easy thing for them to do, because they can get all their information together. They can say what they want to say. And candidates can also see this list of questions that we are putting in front of you now. This isn't a secret list. Everything is in the public domain. Everything is available to them on the website. So as they're planning their speech, they could also be thinking about the possible questions that they might be asked to get themselves completely prepared. Okay. Now, the marking then for assessment task 2, the candidates have 20 marks. As you'll see from that mark scheme, there are more marks for communication content than there are for linguistic knowledge and accuracy. So the emphasis really is on the communication. So if we have a look through the 10 to 12 descriptor, communicates detailed information relevant to the topic and questions, consistently extended sentence sequences of speech. Okay, so perhaps this is the candidate is linking ideas together well. They're producing longer sentences. Their English is nice and fluent here. Speaks and responds with ease to questions spontaneously, resulting in natural interaction. So it doesn't sound, as they do their questions, too rehearsed or too pre-learnt. Okay, the questions come spontaneously. The teacher examiner is listening to what the candidate has said and is producing their questions naturally based on that, rather than working from a list as well. Communication is clear with occasional ambiguity. So we understand what the student says. Occasionally, it might be a little bit difficult to understand, but that's okay. We're not saying you can't, we don't need absolute perfection, even for 12 marks. And pronunciation and intonation are consistently accurate and intelligible. They need to sound clear. If they have a good English accent, that's great, but they don't need to have a perfect English accent. What they need to do is to pronounce the words clearly, and the intonation needs to be clear. And so it's considered to be worthy in that sort of 12-mark box if an English person would have no difficulty understanding what they said. So they don't need to have a perfect English accent. We just need to be able to understand clearly what they say. Okay. So we have another question about, can they choose the topic for task 2? Yes, that's absolutely fine. Yes. For linguistic knowledge and accuracy, we're looking for a wide range of vocabulary that's consistently appropriate to the task, wide range of straightforward and complex structures that are used effectively and appropriately with few lapses, and consistently accurate vocabulary and structures with minor errors. So there are two elements to the linguistic knowledge and accuracy. There's the range, so range of vocabulary and range of structures, and there's also the accuracy. So we've got linguistic knowledge and accuracy as two separate ideas there. Please work to make sure that vocabulary is good for this task, and according to whatever the student's chosen topic is, they will need to have good vocabulary there. And it's a good idea for you, as you're teaching them and preparing them, to listen carefully for, sometimes we find that there are words that are used almost too many times and it becomes repetitive. Words like problem, we hear problem, 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 problem. And so that's not demonstrating a wide range of vocabulary if we use, and inevitably within this global topics, a word like problem is a word that will appear. So a word like problem, sometimes replaced with difficulty or challenge, can help to widen out that sort of range of vocabulary. So have a bit of a think about, whether we can find some, for those commonly used words, those words that are going to crop up a lot within this sort of task area. Maybe have a think about providing your students with some different ways of saying those things to widen out and expand that vocabulary. And we're also looking for language which is has kind of some complexity, and quite often this is about clause structures. So about things like using a good range of subordinating conjunctions and so on and so forth. So we don't always want to say this is something, but a sentence that starts although something, there is however, can convey the same message, but also be more complex in terms of the structure. So again, sometimes those sentences with two clauses that are, the natural desire of the students is to connect those two parts of the sentence with and or but actually you might want to show them different ways that we can express those ideas. So again, developing that range of complexity. And use the reading papers and the transcripts from the listening papers as well as a sort of guide to the level of complexity that we might want our students to understand. It's really quite a nice task to take one of those number recording 8 or recording 9 from the listening exam and find a range of structures in there and practice using those in speech, because that level at sort of A1 to B2 is reflected through the whole qualification. So what we see produced and used in reading and listening is the sort of thing that we might hope for the students to be able to produce themselves in speaking and writing. Okay. And then we move on to task 3. And task 3 is the picture based conversation. So this is a 5-minute task and again is worth 20 marks. So the teacher examiner leads the student into an extended conversation covering the remaining topics that are not covered in the assessment so far. So the role play will have been dealt with, but we're going into a different place here. There will be an examiner's booklet produced for you with the tasks that will give you precise detail at the time of the ahead of the test. Students can make notes during the 10 minutes of supervised preparation as well. So a list of prompt questions is provided for the teacher examiners to use, but that's not a prescriptive or exhaustive list. So the conversation should be free and genuine and spontaneous, if you see what I mean. So where we said with the task 2, you needed to use that list of questions adapted to what the student had said with a maximum of 2 of your own. When we get to the picture-based conversation, those questions are just suggestions, so you can take that as naturally as you'd like to take it. So what the candidates, what the students will see is a picture, something like that. And they are asked to describe the picture: people, place, and activity. Okay, so they talk about the picture. In the picture, there are 5 people. There's a young couple. Maybe they're a married couple, but there are 3 children. There is 1 baby who is sitting on the father's lap, and there are 2 little girls who are at the front of the picture. Maybe they're twins, and they're able to speculate. So we talk about the people, the family, and we talk about the place. The family are in their home. They're in the home. We can see that there's a sofa, there's a rug on the floor. There are lots of boxes around. So maybe they have just moved into this home, or they have been shopping. We can do that. And then we can talk about the activity. The 2 little girls are taking a plant from the box. The mother is using her laptop, and perhaps she is writing an email to her friend. Perhaps she is doing some online shopping. The father is talking to the baby. So we look for that people, place, activity in the description of the picture. And then the teacher examiner, it says, will begin a conversation with you relating to the picture and the topic of houses and homes. So we know what you've got to talk about. Okay, you're not going to talk about school or future plans or anything like that. Okay, they're going to begin that conversation relating to the topic of houses and homes. And in your responses, remember to give opinions, talk about past, present, and future, use a wide range of vocabulary, ask a question about the topic. So you, as the teacher examiner, are going to decide your questions, but in order for students to gain the full number of marks and cover the full task, you need to make sure that your questions enable them to do the things that are required of them there. So give your opinions. We'll have a look in a moment, but give your opinions. So we want, what do you think of? What's your opinion of? Do you think such and such a thing is good or bad, and why? You're going to ask them to talk about the past, present, and future. Okay, so what in your area, what were houses like in the past, or maybe things about what would your ideal home be like in the future? So past, present, and future. We want to encourage them to use a wide range of vocabulary, and you will know what kind of vocabulary they can use, but we want to encourage them to use that wide range of vocabulary. So if you have a question, you think, actually, if I ask them that question, I know that they're going to answer with a wider range of vocabulary. Try to encourage them to do it. And the candidates also need to ask you a question about the topic. When you answer that question, please just answer briefly. You just say, yes, I really like that, because obviously we don't want to take the candidate's time. We know you can speak English, and so you don't need to prove it. What we need is to give the candidates the maximum time to prove it. And it's useful just to say to your candidates, look, you need to ask me a question. I might only just give you a brief answer because I don't want to take your time. It's not because I'm not interested in your question or I don't really want to answer it, but we need to get you to do that. Candidates are sort of given some guidance about the kind of question that they might ask. Okay, so we're wanting a sort of specific question rather than things like, do you agree, or so on. Okay, so instructions for you then: you start the task with the introduction provided. The description element of the picture task is intended to last no more than 2 minutes. Again, you need to kind of stop them if they talk for more than 2 minutes about the description of the picture, because we've got to have time for the follow-on conversation, and it should last up to 3 minutes. You should use the list of set questions to choose conversation questions to ask the candidate, but you may choose up to 2 of your own questions. We've talked about that. Questions may be repeated, but no more than twice, and candidates must be allowed to develop their responses as well as they're able. Okay. So you have the introduction. So introduce the task with the following. We're now going to complete the final task, task 3. Look at the picture. We're going to discuss the picture and the topic of houses and homes. So ask the questions below. Describe the photo. And if you think they haven't said much, you can say, anything else? Tell me about a place you lived when you were younger. What was it like? Tell me about it. And then you can, add in if you want to, what did you like or dislike? What did you enjoy? What type of home do you want to live in when you're older? Tell me about it. What rooms, what features, and so on. Okay. Some people think that having an outside space or a garden at home is really important. Do you agree? Why? Why not? What alternatives? Okay, and so on. Okay. So we follow that through. Okay. At the end of the test, say thank you. That's the end of the test. And we have a look again at the mark scheme for this task. We're seeing a lot of similarities with the mark scheme for task 2. Again, 20 marks, and again, the balance of them, there are more marks for communication and content than there are for linguistic knowledge and accuracy. So describes the picture and responds to questions in a consistently fluent and developed manner. Okay, so they're not just giving simple short sentences as an answer at the top end. We're talking naturally and we're developing our answers. Candidates need to speak and respond with ease to questions spontaneously, resulting in natural interactions. It needs to sound nice and natural. Communication is clear with occasional ambiguity. Pronunciation and intonation are consistently accurate and intelligible. And for the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, again, just the same things that I said about range of vocabulary and range of structures, and also accuracy. So both of those two elements, there's linguistic knowledge and accuracy, are kind of separately but assessed, but within that 7 to 8 box. And you know, again, it doesn't need to be perfect for the 12 or the 8 marks. We don't necessarily expect perfection. You know, this is an international GCSE, and we are not doing a university degree, and we're not doing you know, a master's or a PhD or anything like that. So keep in mind that you know, that kind of cutoff point of that B2 level, and if you're not familiar with those levels, that would be again, it's a useful bit of professional development for teachers if you have, or even if you haven't looked at them for ages, just to have another look, just to remind yourself of where we're going, so that you target your teaching to the level, the top of the level that the students are going to need for this qualification. And if students have all reached that level, then of course you can go further in your teaching, but that we don't necessarily ask them to do things that are more complex than they need to be doing for the assessment that they're getting ready for, because you can lose them that way. Now, I'll say a few things about support and contact. So in terms of support in planning, and I think these are things that we talked about on Monday as well, for those of you who were with me on Monday, there's a getting started guide, and that gives you the overview of the qualification to help you understand the changes to the content and assessment and what these changes mean for teachers and learning. There's an editable course planner and schemes of work, so all of these things available via the website. And there are mapping documents that highlight the key differences between the new and the previous specification, because of course, you know, there are differences, there are things there, and so that will affect your choice of resources and so on and so forth, and approaches to teaching and to pedagogy in certain aspects. For teaching and learning, there are skills maps that highlight opportunities for learners to develop skills which are assessed, as well as skills which are not directly assessed, because obviously we're teaching them English. We're not necessarily just teaching them to pass this exam. We want them to pass this exam, we want them to do well, but the bigger goal, of course, is you know, that good sort of mastery of English. And we've got print and digital learning and teaching resources that sort of promote anytime, any place learning. For preparing for exams, then, there's a range of resources to help you prepare learners for assessments. And that includes specimen papers, and we had questions on Monday about whether we would have more specimen papers and those things. So I will check up on those things and keep an eye on the website for news. We'll talk to you in a moment about contact. There will be examiner commentaries as well that follow each series, and examiner reports. Have a look back on the ones from the previous specifications, because where the tasks are similar and where the principal examiner has pointed out some problems that have arisen and common areas that it would be useful for teachers to work on. That can be a really good source of information and guidance to, look at your candidates and see whether that applies to your students and what you can do to fix that and to develop that. And there's a variety of online resources as well, accessible through Edexcel online. Our subject advisor is Rebecca Waker. There she is. And you can email her at teachinglanguages@pearson.com. Also follow on Twitter at Pearson MFL Quals. Phone number is there, and there's a team of people, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty getting through. You can sign up as well for updates. You can visit the customer portal, visit your languages community page, and also book one-to-one consultations, and also bespoke training from Pearson. People will, wherever you are in the world, if you want to get somebody to come, and they can organize all of those things and provide you with more sort of bespoke training. And always the person to go to really is the subject advisor, and that's Rebecca. I had a question about whether we'll get the PowerPoint and recording. I think you should do, and I will check what happens with them, and hopefully that should come your way. That's normally the case. You normally have the recording available, but I don't know whether maybe it's sent out immediately or how soon. If you don't receive it, sometimes what has happened is that it's somebody else in your school that booked you onto the like the exams officer, and they've given their email, and it maybe sometimes goes somewhere else. But in the event that you don't, please, that teachinglanguages@pearson.com, chase it through there, and they will be able to hopefully get you the PowerPoint